Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Creditverse, where we talk about everything in the credit universe. I'm Rod Griffin, Senior Director of Consumer Education and Advocacy for Experian. And April is Military Saves Month. The men and women serving in the U.S. military and their families face very unique financial challenges as compared to civilians like me. And joining me to discuss what some of those are and why saving is so important to our servicemen and women is Military Saves Director Angela Caban, an Army National Guard spouse and mom of two. So you already have a full-time job plus two more full-time jobs. I don't know how you do it. She's responsible for directing and overseeing communications that effectively describe and promote the program and its services. Prior to joining Military Saves, Angela was a community manager for USAA, where she was responsible for the strategic planning of the digital-based platform open to 11 million members. In 2010, Angela founded the Homefront United Network, a military support network to help bridge the gap between the active duty, National Guard, and Reserve communities. The Homefront United Network was named a top military support network by joining forces in 2014. She's been published in various print and online publications with a writing focus on military lifestyles and financial headlines for everyday military families. Notice I'm reading all of this because there's too much for me to even begin to remember. Angela, welcome to the program.
Thank you for having me. It's an honor to be here. So excited to get this conversation started.
Well, there's a lot to talk about, and let's kind of jump right in. What is Military Saves Month, and what's it all about? Why do we need it?
Yeah, so I'd like to talk a little bit about Military Saves as a whole first, and then kind of work the month into that. So we've been around since 2005. We are also a component of America Saves, and we're a nonprofit of our parent organization, the Consumer Federation of America. So for those who have never heard of Military Saves, what we've been doing since 2005 is to help motivate, support, and encourage currently over 380,000 within the military community to help them save money, reduce their debt, and to build wealth. So a really fun fact that I always like to include in these conversations, which makes us different than most programs, is that we're based off of behavioral economics and social marketing. So what that is that we encourage and we support to help change those spending behaviors and to motivate the action behind, saving money. So when we talk a little bit about what that looks like and what that action is, we encourage everyone within the military community, whether you're active duty, National Guard, Reserve, military spouse, a DOD contractor, to take the Military Saves Pledge. And what this is a promise that you make to yourself, and it's the start of creating that savings plan. So you're able to do so online or via text, and you're going to pretty much stay connected with us. And we're going to be your accountability check-in to help you with the reminders, keep you motivated, give you some resources and some tips. And you also gain access to other resources such as free financial counseling. We have a partnership with the Yellow Ribbon Network, as well as AFCPE. And then we also have your free credit report and your free credit score that you can obtain from after taking the Military Saves Pledge, and that's courtesy of FINRA. So there's lots of different ways and to motivate you and some benefits to help you getting not only to save, but to save effectively. So I think also the reason that the Military Saves program does what it does, and it's so important, is financial readiness. When we're talking that as a whole, as a picture, it really is the core of mission ready within the military community. So one thing that I love is that we provide realistic and attainable tactics to help you save money, and we meet you where you are, which I think is so important. I think financial readiness has always kind of gotten a bad rap when it comes to, well, someone's just going to tell me I need X amount of money or 3 months worth of, living expenses. And that could be a little overwhelming to many people who are struggling. So we love the approach of meeting you where you are. And if you aren't able to save for that specific goal, or if you're not exactly where you want to be, it's okay. We have the resources and the tools to help you get back on track. So then kind of jumping into your initial question about what Military Saves Month is, we transitioned away from Military Saves Week last year in 2020. And the reason we did that is we really wanted to focus on what April is, and that's Financial Capability Month. So it's made it really easy for us to align our campaign with something that I think a lot of organizations that support us, as well as the military community, are already doing. So what Military Saves Month is that it's a nationwide campaign, and we have hundreds of organizations, military installations, financial institutions, nonprofits, government entities, and they participate collectively to encourage the entire military community to focus on their savings. So we always say here, you go for your yearly, checkup at your doctor. So think of this as a checkup for your money, which is very much needed in the military. Things are constantly changing. So we're actually on the last day of week 4 for Military Saves Month, and this week's theme was Save by Reducing Debt. And then next week is our final week of Military Saves Month, where we're going to be talking about saving as a family.
Yeah, hugely important. So a lot there, and so it's I think the pledge is such an important concept, that you make a commitment to yourself first and foremost, but then you have an accountability partner, someone who can help you stick to your commitment that you've made to yourself. And I think that's key. It's so easy to kind of let that go. Yeah. The other thing I think that's important when we think about military lives, it's a very different, in many ways, a different kind of lifestyle than a civilian lifestyle. You move a lot. Right. You're reliant on people if you're deployed, to help you with your finances and with your commitments when you're overseas and your family may not be with you. I mean, it's quite different, and we don't always in the civilian world think about what that entails. So I think in terms of saving and other financial commitments, what kinds of things, and as you talked about, the financial readiness and being part of, being ready to do your job in the military, right, is what that comes down to. And if you're worried about your finances, it's hard to focus on your job. And I have friends and family who serve in the military, and one of the things we talk about is that in the military, with my job, if I'm not thinking about finances, I might misspell something in an email. Yeah. No big deal. But if you're in the military and you're worried about finances and you're distracted, people's lives can depend on that. Right. And so it's really critical that we help our servicemen and women do their jobs so that they can all come home. Yeah. Now that's kind of what gets to me, right? And to think about. So in that sense, what are the key things that military families should think about in terms of saving? What are the kind of focus that they need in as a starting point?
Yeah. So, right, similar to what you just said, that financial readiness really is the core of the mission readiness for the service member. And, I think about it even to my own personal experiences. If we're struggling with the finances, I don't want my spouse to get distracted. So a lot of times, military spouses, because the majority of us are the ones that are handling the finances at home. There's certain things that we might not mention, or we might not, again, take that focus, off of their job. So we carry a lot for our family, and we carry a lot for the community and one another. So I think for the family unit, because there is so much to worry about, finances also too, when you look at it, it's such an essential component to, and this is for everyone, but for our emotional and our physical well-being. We're always talking about how it is a form of self-care. If you're stressing out about your finances, where you are, or you're thinking and your mind is spinning constantly, and we're seeing this with military families at the top of their list, unfortunately, where they're saying that financial stress beats out separation and deployment. Like money is always at the top of that list. So I think as we continue to talk about, the financial well-being of our military community, first, we have to identify those barriers, right, that families might have when it comes to saving. There's so many wonderful nonprofits and some military service organizations that put out surveys each year. And unfortunately, financial readiness is always an issue, So we have the frequent moves that you had said, moving expenses. A lot of times, unfortunately, there's things that are not covered or you have to pay out of pocket first. You have to also take into account your cost of living adjustments. You might be going from, our senior program manager went from South Florida to DC, so you always have to take that into consideration. So then you have what we also call erratic pay schedule. The military can also struggle when it comes to, pretty much raising a family on one income. We saw this with the pandemic, that there has been a huge spike in military spouse unemployment. They're now, looking for other ways to supplement that income. So I think helping military families identify what those barriers are and taking that into consideration, I think helping them and providing these resources, to kind of get a better grasp out of what that picture looks like for them. It's important to have that plan. You have to be prepared. It could take potentially years to come out of, debt, which is very common, unfortunately. So yeah, I think definitely while we're talking about military financial readiness, we have to, identify what are the struggles for them.
Yeah. And are there, we think about moving, what other kinds of things should they prioritize? Is it kind of the same things that a civilian would prioritize? What are different, some similarities and differences there?
Yeah, so we always, at Military Saves, we have so many different types of goals that you can save for, whether, because everybody's in a different stage in their life. Others are doing a little bit better than, even while we were in the military, there were days where we thought, oh, we got a good grasp on what our finances are going to look like. And then a month later, something happens, an unexpected expense that we didn't plan for. So I always like to say there is no right or wrong goal within the military, because again, everything changes. So believe it or not, here at Military Saves, we've seen it be very consistent with the top goal that military families are saving for, and it's building an emergency fund. So we say a lot that each, American should have at least $500 to cover an extreme emergency, whatever that might be. But with that being said, we're also seeing that there's a lot of debt in the military community. And that debt costs money, right? So, you can be putting money aside into an emergency savings account, but then you have all this debt accumulating, whether it's credit card debt or whatever it might be. So the situations, you're still, somewhat having some kind of a financial struggle there. So you don't want to be caught off guard with emergencies. So one of the things that we also recommend is saving for transition. Other than emergencies. And transition can be moving. Transition can be getting ready to leave the military. And it's about having those conversations way earlier than a year before you transition out, which unfortunately we see that as a big barrier as well. But we can't emphasize that enough, that retirement needs to be a priority. And, if you're not saving for your retirement, you're stealing from your future self, if you think about it.
Yeah, huge issue. And I know I've had the honor of working with some organizations and talking to airmen and new recruits and doing some training. And the interesting thing is, to me, was a lot of the people I talked to were very young, straight out of high school, really lacked any financial knowledge, and they're trying to understand what happens. And if you leave a base, it was always shocking to me that as you went through the gate, you saw payday loans, title loans, and car dealerships. It was
That's a problem.
Yeah. So, I talked to one young man who asked me if he could open an account, and I went, "Oh, you mean a credit account?" Like a savings account. He had no idea he could even have a bank account yet with his check. So, and so I was talking about how do you have automatic savings. So talk a little bit about how you can, as a military member, family member, create automatic savings. How do you make it happen without having to think about it?
Yeah. And just just bouncing off of what you just said, I think too that age plays a really big role in it, because unfortunately I was a very late saver for retirement, and I realized like, oh wow, if you just don't visualize yourself when you're 20 years old, oh, I'll get to it at one point. You're not going to be 60 for a long time, or however old you are when you retire. So in the military, I feel like there's all these resources, all of this financial information that they have, I think it's just a way we're trying to communicate it to them. So when we're talking about saving automatically, it's the easiest way to save. And I don't think that they think about, I think they get a little nervous with things coming out of their account without them knowing when it's happening. So what I always say, and something that's worked for me, if you're active duty, if you're a service member, or even if you're National Guard reservist, if you're getting paid by the military, you can set up an automatic allotment. You can do it through DFAS, which is, who pays them. You log right into your portal, where you go and you look at your pay stub every pay period, and you can allocate, what, even at the smallest little amount. Another way to do it super easy is to your financial institution. Whether, again, you're the service member or you're the spouse, if you set up that percentage of your pay to automatically come out of your checking account into a savings account without even looking at it, and you kind of forget about it. It's like that set it and forget it mentality. Every little bit adds up. And that's another thing. Don't beat yourself up. Even if you're starting now and you're older, it's okay. But sometimes I do think, I'm like, wow, if I would have just started that when I was 20 years old, I can't even imagine, the amount of money we would have. But yeah, just visualize it and add it up, and don't look at it. That's another thing. When you're setting up, your automatic savings, of course, unless there's some type of an emergency, try to let it sit and just accumulate. It does. You'll be surprised how much you can save up.
And it can happen fast. And as for that retirement thing, you're right. When I was in my 20s, I'd look in the mirror and go, that's a long ways away. Now I look in the mirror and forget, oh crap, it's getting a lot closer than I thought.
Yeah.
Forgetting. Every morning, ooh, something happened to my beard. What is the deal? But it starts to come faster and faster, but it's still a long ways away. So, starting early and making it automatic, I think that's a lesson for everybody. If you can set it, forget it, not see it, that's something we did, my wife and I, when we first got together, was we decided we were going to have $1,000 cash saved in our checking account.
Right.
It took us 6 months to get there, both working. And then we zeroed out our register. At the time, you had this paper thing. Right. So some people remember those. And we just made it zero. And that's for the last 20 plus years. That's been where, what we've done. That's sort of our basic step. And we always keep it there. And you just never know when you're going to need it. And we had 4 flat tires at the same time on my truck. Yeah. At Christmas. So
that's expensive. Wow.
It saved us. I mean, we were able to, we had one flat, we changed the flat. The others we found out were going flat. But at any rate, we got to the car and got new tires and started over, so, that an emergency fund and just kind of making it a habit and then having it automatically deducted is hugely important.
That's behavioral economics, making that habit, right?
Yeah. And that's the hard part, is creating the habit, I think. Mm-hmm. So we know it's important to save. We know it's important to try to make it automatic. What are some resources to do that? And what resources are available to servicemen and women that maybe we don't have in the civilian world? I know, on bases, there are family readiness centers, for example, that they can draw on. What are some resources they have?
Absolutely. And I'm so happy you mentioned that, because we can't stress enough, especially for the active duty community that has the resources right there. Please tap into your financial counselors at the installation. Not only do they have resources, but they're there to sit down and have those conversations, answer your questions, whether it's about saving for retirement, building that emergency fund. Maybe it's to just create a simple budget. That's what they're there for. However, if you're not near an installation, or you prefer to do so, virtual, I feel like everybody's virtual nowadays, Military One Source. They have a hub of resources when it comes to financial readiness within the military community. They also have counselors that you can chat with, whether it's on the phone. So there's a lot of really great, and this is all free. Another thing, that's really important to stress. For veterans, those who have transitioned out of the military, or maybe you live really, really far from an installation, which happened to us as a National Guard family, we actually have a partnership with the Yellow Ribbon Network and AFCPE that provides free financial counseling to you virtually, or you can do it on the phone if you don't want to do it virtually. And another one that I also like to bring up is the TSP. TSP.gov has this calculator that it's actually quite scary if you if you haven't started saving for your retirement. It'll tell you how much you're going to need for your retirement based off of the age that you want to retire. But then it also shows you how putting away the smallest part of your salary, like contributing a small percentage, adds up, and it gives you that actual number. And you look at it and you're like, well, wow, that's not a small number. So I was also going to say, within military saves, if you ever feel like you're overwhelmed, like, oh, I don't know where to start, the pledge really is the start of that. And we'll give you all the resources. We'll list everything out for you. So especially in the military community, because like you said, there is so much more, I think, that supports us in our, in our life cycles that we're going through here, no matter where you are, that it does seem overwhelming at sometimes, but I think it's important to have the conversations and know that there's resources there that you need to tap into.
Yeah. And I think, and don't be afraid to ask. I think that's a conversation I have a lot is it's just this, it's not always shame. It's just embarrassment or not knowing that you need to ask, not knowing what you don't know. So I always tell people, don't be afraid to ask for help, because there are lots of people who want to help, and they're
professionals. So there is no, and it's interesting you said shame, because I do think there is a little bit of shame. I think they don't want to be seen in this situation where they're going to be questioned. Well, how did you let it get this bad? Like, before coming and speaking to someone. So they're trained to have these conversations. There's no judgment there. So, we've all been there, and it's important whether you are doing financially, if you're financially, you think you're doing well, you're paying your bills, you have savings. It's still important to check in on your finances. I don't think that's something that you should just let it slide. That's, again, why we have Military Saves Month, so you have that opportunity. But yeah, those financial counselors are definitely there to help you.
Yeah, and I think that's so important. I mean, find objective, knowledgeable, non-judgmental advice, and they'll help. And what I do, it's to this day. And you're right, we've all been there. I could tell so many stories about what I did that I should not have done when I was younger, that I learned the hard way. Here's a question that's important to me, because I work for Experian, and our expertise is in credit reporting. So around debt and credit. Why is that so important to saving? I mean, I think that's a connection people don't often make. What do you need to think about your debt in order to save?
And you are so right about that. Even prior to coming here to Military Saves, I never really thought that paying off your debt or paying down your debt is saving, because you're thinking, oh, well, you're just paying another bill. No, that is saving. That is a form of saving. So we have an entire week, during Military Saves Month, that talks about how paying down that debt, can help you. So when you're eliminating that debt, you're reducing your interest. Like, do the math of what that interest paid over time is truly costing you. So I think this is helpful, especially if you have high, credit card debt. You're improving your credit score too, which at first I was like, oh my goodness, that makes so much sense. In the future, you're getting better interest rates. You're saving money with a better interest rate, because you've helped improve your credit score. So, once your credit score goes up, creditors are looking at that, they're trusting you, right, with that credit. So I think once your debt is paid off too, I know there's lots of different methods. People, say, oh, I'll pay off debt and save at the same time. For me personally, it was overwhelming to do both at the same time. So I just focused on paying off the debt first. And then once that debt was paid, you can really focus on saving and maybe even potentially have some new financial goals. So I think it's really important as a community, not only just for the military, but as Americans, individuals, that we understand that, that debt, that, paying down that debt, you're really saving yourself a lot for the future.
Yeah. And I think that's something, we talk about here, is that, and you're exactly right. It's that if you manage your credit well, it becomes a financial tool. Right. And it shouldn't be a barrier. If you're managing credit well, you can invest in debt essentially and get lower interest rates, saves you money. You'll also find that, we all have cell phones, we all have utility service, we all have all of the things we do actually can qualify you for, lower setup fees, lower deposits, things of that sort. So without taking on debt, has nothing to do with debt, but it can save you money because you're using credit well. And that lets you put that money you saved or didn't have to spend in savings. And so we did years ago, we actually did a survey with Consumer Federation of America and found that people with good credit habits also had good savings habits, and vice versa. They did better. If they didn't have good credit habits, they struggled with saving, and vice versa. They're very closely tied.
They go hand in hand. Yeah.
It's sort of a mindset. So, if we can get people to get their credit report, and you can get it once a week now for free. So at annualcreditreport.com, you can get it at Experian.com, free once a month. You get monitoring services with it. You get your credit score with it. So, we want people to not be afraid to check the credit report. And I always tell people, no matter who I talk to, when I say, "Did you get your credit report?" They're like, "No." It's like, you do. Don't be afraid to know what's in it. Because you can't do anything about it until you do. And take that first step. Because if you're managing your credit well, you're going to save better, and it's going to help you be more financially successful throughout your life. So, my admonition to everybody to check your credit report, because it'll help you save. They go together. You mentioned having unexpected expenses. And I actually heard someone say once that there are no financial emergencies. There are just unplanned for expenses, unplanned for unknown expenses. So how do we, and I think that goes to the emergency saving conversation, right? How do we help people not have emergencies, but just have unplanned for expenses?
Yeah. So it's funny because that word unexpected, at least for us in the military, we call that Sergeant Murphy's Law. What can go wrong will go wrong. And I think that could be, a ton of different situations. You were just saying, like your car, your tires, all four of them at the same time. One deployment, my dishwasher literally fell out of my wall. It just collapsed, which was the most bizarre thing, but that cost money. And then we just saw recently with the COVID pandemic, a lot of military spouses lost their income, back down to a one income family. That was one thing, luckily for the military community, at least that spouse still had, employment. However, I think if you plan and you prepare for that emergency, that goes back to the self-care piece. You don't have that additional burden or the stress, and they always say, better have it and not need it than need it and not have it. So I think a great way to start saving for that unexpected, and we've had this conversation here a lot at Military Saves, is save the extra. If you aren't in need of that extra money, if you haven't lost income, if you have no debt, especially that extra money that you weren't expecting, for instance, the stimulus payments, any tax refund, take a portion of that. And you can either start an emergency fund or you can add to it. So there's just so many different opportunities too, especially in the military community. I have a lot of friends who specifically do a lot of freelancing and some side hustle, work where they're just adding to their savings account. And they're using that extra money that's coming in, to kind of supplement that. So I think there's definitely a really good opportunity there. And we actually have for the stimulus payment at the time when, these were coming out, we have a decision tree that kind of, map this out for you. We're saying, well, if you don't have debt, if you don't have to, buy food for the house, if you're not, struggling financially, then you should really look at how you can take a portion of that stimulus and put it into a savings account to help plan. Because I think there was a little panic, which there should have been during COVID, as to how we could better prepare if anything like this were to happen.
Well, I think, and on that point, we're already 30 minutes in. It goes so fast. So you're thinking about emergency saving, thinking about how you start to save. Tell us again, where can people learn about Military Saves, and how do they take the pledge, and where do they sign up?
Yeah. So the best way to learn more about military saves is to head on over to militarysaves.org. And of course, we're all over social media, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, LinkedIn. We also have a Facebook group that's called Military Savers. And it's such an engaging, supporting community. You can ask questions, engage with other, military service members or spouses in the community, which is really great. And to take the Military Saves Pledge, you can do so when you head on over to militarysaves.org. Or, I feel like everybody has their cell phone on them. You can text the keyword military saves, and that's just one word, to 877-877, and that opts you right into the program.
Fantastic. Angela, thank you for being here today for such an important conversation and for the work you do and being part of the Creditverse. To find out more about that, the Creditverse and Credit Chat Live, please check out ex.pn/CreditChatLive. You'll find this video on YouTube soon at ex.pn/CreditChatLiveYT. And you can join Experian every week on Wednesday, 2 o'clock Central, 3 o'clock Eastern on Twitter at CreditChatLive, ex.pn/CreditChatLive. Angela, thank you again. Thank you everyone for joining and for all of the wonderful work you do. Take care, and I'm sure we'll talk again soon. Thank you so much.